33 revelations about Jesus that history never told and that few know. Get ready to dive into the most intriguing and little-known layers of Jesus' life, where history and mystery intertwine in an almost enigmatic way. This video offers an immersive experience that goes beyond the usual accounts, presenting 33 facts about Jesus that have generated fascination and debate over the centuries. It is believed that each phase of his life, from his birth in Bethlehem to the supernatural events that surrounded him, carries a profound meaning that goes beyond human understanding. For some, he is the divine figure who fulfilled ancient prophecies. For others, an influential sage who challenged the norms of his time. What if there are even more interpretations which could reshape our understanding of the nature of Jesus? The narrative explores his mysterious childhood and the lost years, where theories suggest that he studied and drew inspiration from spiritual traditions of distant cultures. Could these hidden years have shaped the figure he would become? Next, you will be taken to the moment of his revelation as the Messiah, where his words and miracles profoundly impacted those around him. Each event presented invites the viewer to reflect, from the first miracles and enigmatic parables to the moment of the crucifixion and finally, the resurrection. This content presents different perspectives on how Jesus is interpreted as a spiritual leader, a revolutionary, or for many, a divine presence, offering a rich and inclusive panorama for all points of view. Share this video and let everyone draw their own conclusions. This is an invitation to an experience of discovery that continues to reverberate through time, awakening curiosity and inspiring new reflections. The mysterious origin of Jesus. Imagine an event so profoundly planned that it defies human understanding. The origin of Jesus begins with ancient prophecies, passed down through generations of prophets, each one claiming that his birth would bring something extraordinary to the world. He will be born in Bethlehem, they said, but not in a golden cradle among the powerful. Instead, he would be born in a place of simplicity and humility. Bethlehem, the house of bread, would be the stage for the birth of the one many would see as the bread of life. On the night of his birth, the presence of an unusual star in the heavens guided wise men from the east to the infant Jesus. These visitors, bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, demonstrated the reverence Jesus inspired even in distant lands. For some, these gifts symbolize Jesus' royalty, spirituality, and mortality, hinting at the complex destiny that awaited him. And what of the threat that loomed over him from an early age? It is believed that Herod, the king of Judea, ordered the persecution of all children in the region in a desperate attempt to prevent the rise of a new king. Joseph and Mary were warned of the danger in a dream and fled to Egypt, beginning Jesus' life under the sign of exile and divine protection. The figure of Mary, Jesus' mother, is also shrouded in mystery. Many see her as a symbol of devotion and unwavering faith, but the virgin birth that involves her continues to defy reason and raise questions, being interpreted both as a miracle and as a metaphor for spiritual purity. Mary's role transcends that of an ordinary mother, being a living connection between the human and the divine. Little is known about Jesus' childhood, and the few existing accounts are like fragments of a larger story. Could this lack of records have been a way of protecting Jesus from persecution or of preparing him for his mission? Some suggest that this silence represents a period of preparation, a phase of silent learning that would help him understand the world and the challenges he would face. Every detail of this early life creates a framework of symbolism and mystery that echoes throughout the story, generating both faith and questions. The city of Bethlehem, the flight into Egypt, and the protection of Mary form a first chapter full of profound meanings, where the ordinary mixes with the extraordinary. This is not just the beginning of a man's story, but the first act of a legend that continues to fascinate humanity. The lost years and the formation of the young Jesus. Imagine a young man growing up in a forgotten town, Nazareth, where the routine is marked by simplicity and hard work. Jesus' childhood and adolescence took place amidst this peaceful landscape, and the mystery surrounding these lost years continues to intrigue historians and believers to this day. It is believed that little was recorded about this period, almost as if time itself tried to preserve secrets until the right moment. What exactly shaped this young man, who would later become such a remarkable figure? Jesus, the son of a carpenter, learned the trade, and many suggest that carpentry, with its symbolism of transformation, prepared him for a life of building and healing. The act of shaping raw wood into something useful and beautiful may have left a deep mark on his way of seeing the world and the people around him. He was seen by many as an ordinary young man. However, some accounts indicate that he already displayed unusual knowledge and sensitivity for his age. Several theories suggest that during these years he may have come into contact with other cultures and spiritual traditions. Some scholars speculate that he traveled outside of Galilee, possibly to Egypt, where he would have access to mystical knowledge, or even to India, where he might have found wisdom in spiritual schools. These theories, although not historically proven, add a layer of mystery and raise the question, did Jesus find answers in other religious traditions before defining his own mission? Jesus' relationship with his family is also an important piece of the puzzle. Mary and Joseph, aware of their son's special destiny, seem to have protected him with devotion. What about Jesus' brothers, who, according to some accounts, were initially skeptical of his mission? These family ties seem complex, reflecting both a deep connection and a growing tension as he began to set himself apart from the others. Each fragment of these silent years is like a clue left behind, suggesting that Jesus may have been absorbing lessons from ordinary life, relationships, and possibly spiritual encounters that would shape his understanding of faith and humanity. For some, these lost years are a symbol of preparation, a hidden phase of transformation. For others, they represent an intentional mystery, a part of his life kept secret to protect the essence of his mission. Nazareth was more than Jesus' home. It was the setting for an unseen spiritual and human formation, where an extraordinary destiny was quietly taking shape. The mystery remains. What happened during these years that transformed him into the prophet, teacher, and healer the world would come to know? The revelation of the Messiah. And then comes the moment when Jesus, until then a silent enigma, emerges into the world. His encounter with John the Baptist at the Jordan River marks the beginning of a journey that some interpret as the acceptance of his messianic destiny. John, a prophet whose presence already attracted crowds, is described as having recognized something special in Jesus. When he baptized him, a shocking scene occurred. It is believed that the heavens opened, a voice proclaimed Jesus as the beloved Son, and a dove descended upon him, representing the Holy Spirit. This moment is remembered as a watershed, a sign that his mission was about to unfold. After his baptism, he was led into the desert, where he remained for 40 days, fasting and praying. Some interpretations see this period of isolation as a crucial phase, during which he faced temptations that tested his character and faith. Accounts describe how the devil challenged him with promises of power and comfort, which Jesus resisted using the words of the Scriptures. This event is often seen as a demonstration of his determination to remain faithful to his spiritual mission, refusing easier paths. With his return from the desert, Jesus begins to attract followers, but in a surprising way. His first disciples are not religious leaders or influential people, but fishermen, simple men who, by all appearances, see in Jesus a spiritual authority that defies the ordinary. Simon Peter, Andrew, James, and John respond to his call, and thus, alongside him, a movement begins. that would challenge traditions and change the course of their lives. The first miracles he performs, healings, exorcisms, and signs of power, quickly attract the attention of the people. Many interpret these acts as divine signs, but for others, they are demonstrations that destabilize social and religious structures. The healing of a leper, the multiplication of loaves, and the casting out of demons are not just kind acts. They are understood by many as hidden messages that challenge common perception, suggesting that the world may be much more mysterious and flexible than it appears. Throughout this period, Jesus attracts intense and ambiguous reactions. For some, he represents the hope of an imminent kingdom of heaven. For others, his presence and actions seem dangerous, a threat to traditions and the established order. Jesus' mission as Messiah becomes both a promise of salvation and a source of discomfort for those who see him as a transgressor. This chapter reveals Jesus not only as a spiritual leader, but as a challenging enigma, whose actions and words leave deep marks and raise questions that transcend his time. The teachings and mysteries of parables. Jesus emerges as a master of parables, using simple, accessible stories to convey profound teachings. His first appearance in synagogues is surprising, as he offers bold interpretations of Scripture, challenging the established view and inviting people to see beyond the obvious. Many interpret his parables as ways of illuminating spiritual truths without directly confronting the religious establishment. The parable of the sower, for example, seems like an agricultural lesson, but to some, it portrays the different forms of spiritual receptivity. The fertile soil, the rocky path, the thorns, all suggest the complexities of human faith. This story illustrates the view that faith is an individual journey and that each person must discover his or her own soil. Another intriguing narrative is that of the prodigal son, a young man who squanders his inheritance and returns to his father. For many, this story is about forgiveness and reconciliation. Others see it as a broader metaphor for divine acceptance and compassion, suggesting that God's love knows no boundaries, and the forgiving Father would be an image of mercy, while the faithful Son represents humanity in its struggle to understand grace. These parables, such as the narrow gate and the Sermon on the Mount, which praises the humble and hungry, offer varied interpretations of the kingdom of heaven, often challenging traditional concepts of justice and power. Jesus' words question norms and provoke mixed reactions, arousing both admiration and discomfort in his listeners. These enigmatic teachings invite the viewer to reflect. Are they metaphors or invitations to a new spiritual reality? The parables are so mysterious that interpretation is left to those with ears to hear and eyes to see. Miracles and signs of power. Jesus' miracles are much more than demonstrations of power. They seem to open cracks in reality, inviting the viewer to question the laws we believe govern the world. Imagine the scene, a wedding party where the wine runs out, leaving the host in a difficult situation. Jesus, with an almost casual gesture, turns water into wine, and not just any wine, but one of exceptional quality. Many interpret this act, the first recorded miracle, as a harbinger of something great, the beginning of a series of events that defy logic and inspire a new vision of reality. As time passes, Jesus' fame spreads, attracting crowds who follow him, not only for his words, but for his ability to accomplish what, in the eyes of many, seems impossible. He feeds 5,000 people with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, a moment that symbolizes for some the spiritual abundance he brings, where there is no scarcity, only fullness. The multiplication of the loaves and fishes is interpreted as a sign of the power to fill the emptiness of both body and soul. In his healings, Jesus also demonstrates compassion. Blind people who regain their sight, lepers who are cleansed, and paralytics who rise from the dead become visible signs of his impact. Each healing is seen as a reminder that human suffering can be dissolved. For some, these miracles go beyond acts of kindness. They are symbolic messages suggesting that physical and spiritual laws can be transcended. The case of Lazarus, who many believe was resurrected days after his death, is interpreted as proof that time and death are not absolutes, but concepts that, in a certain light, can be transformed. Another of his impactful miracles occurs during a storm. While he's in a boat with his disciples, a violent storm threatens to sink them. Jesus, in an act of pure serenity, commands the wind and the waters to calm down, and instantly the storm ceases. The astonished disciples wonder about the true nature of Jesus, who appears to have a connection with creation itself. For many, this power over the elements reinforces the idea that he has a connection with the divine, while for others, it is proof of his boldness in defying the natural course of things. However, his miracles also begin to attract unwanted attention. Many see him as a sacred figure, while others see him as a direct threat to order. With each new miracle, he seems to destabilize the established structures, which causes unrest among religious and political authorities. For these authorities, Jesus' miracles are an affront to earthly control, suggesting that he reconfigures divine laws that sustain his authority. In this chapter, Jesus assumes an ambiguous role: savior for some, threat for others. His miracles are interpreted as gifts by many and challenges by others, signs of a dawning era and of a truth that can be understood only by those willing to cross the boundaries of the known. Conflict with the powerful and betrayal. With each teaching and each miracle, Jesus attracts more than just followers. He arouses the cautious and suspicious attention of the religious and political leaders of his time. In the eyes of the Pharisees and Sadducees, he is not just a charismatic man. Many see him as a living threat to the established order. His provocative stance and the challenges he poses to conformity and religious hypocrisy begin to outline an inevitable confrontation. In a remarkable episode, he enters the temple and, in an act of indignation, expels the merchants who have transformed that sacred space into a kind of market. The coins fall, the animals scatter, and the place of prayer is taken over by chaos. "You have turned my Father's house into a den of thieves," proclaims Jesus, shedding light on the corruption infiltrating what should be a sacred place. For many, this attitude symbolizes his desire for spiritual reform, his refusal to ally himself with the power structure. He does not seek accommodation. He seems to be seeking transformation, which frightens those who control the religious system. With each teaching, he attracts the attention of those who wish to silence him. His talks about faith, love for others, and forgiveness are too bold for the inflexible system of the Pharisees. In heated debates, he challenges them to rethink their beliefs, and the people begin to see the difference between the spirituality of Jesus and the dogmatism of the religious leaders. For many, Jesus represents a new perspective. For others, a threat that needs to be contained. However, among Jesus' own disciples, a shadow is beginning to form. Judas Iscariot, one of his closest followers, seems increasingly conflicted, as if he does not understand the depth of Jesus' mission. Some believe that Judas expected a warrior Messiah, a liberator who would confront the Roman Empire. Instead, he sees a leader who preaches love and forgiveness, an approach that seems, in the eyes of some, too fragile in the face of the occupying forces. Then Judas makes a decision that would change the course of history. For 30 pieces of silver, he agrees to hand over his master to the religious leaders, an act of betrayal that echoes through time as an example of disloyalty. And as Jesus shares a final meal with his disciples, the Last Supper, where he breaks bread and shares wine as a symbol of his body and blood, he seems aware of what is to come. His words about sacrifice and the future are enigmatic, loaded with symbolism that the disciples would only understand later. In the Garden of Gethsemane, shrouded in darkness and silence, Jesus is finally captured. Judas identifies him with a kiss, while the other disciples flee in panic, leaving him to face his fate alone. At this moment, the man who defied power and healed the suffering is arrested, and the world seems to be on the brink of a great injustice. In this chapter, Jesus emerges as a spiritual revolutionary, beset by the fragility of human loyalty and the weight of institutional corruption. Betrayal and confrontation cease to be just historical events and become symbols of a constant struggle between light and darkness, faith and fear. The trial and crucifixion. The trial of Jesus is often described as a dark theater, a parody of justice carried out under the shadows of a night that seems darker than usual. Before Caiaphas, the high priest, Jesus maintains a puzzling silence, as if the accusations leveled against him are so insignificant that they do not even deserve a response. When questioned about his identity and mission, he responds with silence or enigmatic statements, challenging those present to see beyond the words. By admitting to being the Son of God, according to some accounts, he creates the scandal that the religious leaders hoped for to justify a severe punishment. Yet Caiaphas and the priests seek more. They need validation from Rome for an execution. Jesus is then taken to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, who regards him with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. To Pilate, Jesus seems an enigma, a seemingly harmless figure who speaks of a kingdom not of this world. Some see the encounter between the two as a perverse dance between power and submission, truth and manipulation. Egged on by the authorities, the crowd calls for crucifixion and, in an almost surreal act, chooses to release Barabbas, a condemned criminal, in place of the one who healed, fed, and inspired. The sentence is finally passed. Jesus is condemned to crucifixion, a form of punishment reserved for the most despised. He is stripped naked and scourged, each blow tearing his skin, as if the world were trying to erase his humanity before the final act. A crown of thorns is forced upon his head, a cruel parody of royalty that bleeds and burns, symbolizing the suffering and humiliation imposed upon him. He is then forced to carry the cross through the streets of Jerusalem, staggering under the weight of the wood, while the crowd watches in silence mixed with fascination and revulsion. At Calvary, the stage is set for the final act. Nails pierce his hands and feet, and the sound of creaking wood mingles with murmurs of pain. Jesus is lifted up between two thieves, his last words hovering between pleas and declarations of forgiveness. In a cry that has spanned the centuries, "Why have you forsaken me?" he cries out to the Father, and the echoes of this lament seem to resonate not only on earth, but in the deepest recesses of the human heart. As death approaches, even the sky seems to react. Heavy clouds, an obscured sun, and the earth trembles, as if all of creation senses the magnitude of what is occurring. For those watching, the moment is more than an execution. It is an almost supernatural event, a message that seems written in blood and pain. The disciples, hidden in the crowd, watch in silence, still unable to fully comprehend what they are witnessing. And yet something within them, and perhaps within all of us, seems to recognize that this is not the end, but the prelude to something beyond. In this chapter, the crucifixion of Jesus goes beyond the act of physical death and becomes a profound symbol, a farewell and a promise, an event that hovers between horror and hope, arousing at once fear and a mysterious sense of imminent renewal. Resurrection and the eternal legend. The third day after Jesus' death dawns in an almost palpable silence. The first rays of sunlight touch the horizon as Mary Magdalene approaches the tomb, carrying a mixture of sadness and an almost extinguished hope. But when she arrives, she finds the unexpected. The stone has been rolled away, and the tomb is empty. There is no body, only a space that seems to pulsate with an enigmatic absence. For some, this absence carries an even greater mystery than death itself, suggesting that something out of the ordinary has occurred. Soon, Jesus appears to Mary and then to the disciples in a way that defies conventional explanation. He is not a ghost, nor a vision. He eats, he talks, and he allows them to touch his wounds. At the same time, he appears and disappears like a breath, transcending the limits of the physical and the spiritual. The resurrection, for many, is seen as more than a simple return to life. It would be a transformation, a reconfiguration of natural laws, suggesting that reality can be as flexible as faith itself. Each appearance of his becomes an enigma that dissolves the boundaries between the human and the divine. During the 33 days that follow, he meets with the disciples, transmitting new teachings and guiding them to spread his message to the ends of the earth. For a group of ordinary men, this is a bold, almost impossible mission. However, something has changed in them. The fear they felt has disappeared, replaced by an unshakable conviction. They have witnessed something that for many is indescribable and now carry a truth that cannot be contained. For them, the emptiness of the tomb is filled with the promise of continuity and a future that will echo through generations. Thus, the world begins to change. The disciples face persecution, challenges, and in many cases death itself. Even so, Jesus' message spreads like a flame that seems impossible to extinguish. What began as an isolated event in Jerusalem becomes a legend, then a movement, and finally a force that crosses borders. The promise of Jesus' return becomes part of this narrative and transforms the course of history, leaving an expectation that becomes part of the collective unconscious, as if all of humanity were waiting for a new chapter. For many, Jesus' resurrection is a redefinition of what is possible. With his departure, he leaves a void that drives humanity to search for answers. The empty tomb is at once an end and a beginning, the end of one story and the starting point of another. This legend continues to evolve over the centuries, carrying with it a promise of hope and mystery. In this chapter, Jesus emerges not only as a savior, but as an eternal enigma, an invisible presence that continues to challenge the laws of existence and perception. His resurrection is seen as both an affirmation and an open question, a victory over death and an invitation to question the very limits of reality. The legend becomes immortal, and the emptiness of the tomb echoes as a reminder that the unknown is the core of all mystery. And so we come to the end of this dive into the depths of the mysteries of Jesus. But what we have seen here is only the surface. If this content inspired you, disturbed you, or simply awakened that spark of curiosity, we invite you to join us on this journey. Subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and let YouTube itself guide you to the next discoveries. After all, there is much more to come, and we don't want you to miss any detail. We want to hear your voice. Comment on your impressions, your doubts, or even the theories that this content brought to light. Each perspective adds a new layer to this enigma, and together we can explore meanings that still remain in the shadows. And of course, share this video with those who, like you, seek answers. May this message resonate, inspire, and stimulate reflection. Perhaps the truths lie between the lines and each one must draw their own conclusions. To continue this journey of discovery, 2 videos await you on the screen. One of them is a special recommendation from our channel, Gaia's Ascension, while the other comes directly from the platform itself, which knows well your interest in mysteries. Whichever you choose, get ready to go further. After all, the unknown has never been so fascinating.